let's war game it a little bit. So let's say Israel carries out a successful attack, Iran launches retaliation. It seems like the air defenses are insufficient to repel them. They were insufficient the last time. There's no reason to think that all of a sudden they're going to knock them all out of the air this time, especially Iran has promised something much more severe, that this was just but a taste of what they're capable of. So then they knock out all these whatever it is, energy infrastructure in Israel. And then what? Do you think then Netanyahu just gets on the pulpit and just convinces the U.S. to go to war with Iran?
He's going to try.
Is that the game
I think
plan?
there's no question about it. And that'll be a moment of truth. So far the U.S. has just gone along with everything, basically, that Israel has done. But, it just may be. We just hope there are realists, especially within the military, who understand the limitations of U.S. military power, that we can just hope could win the day and just say, hey, we can't do this. This is going to look really bad. You maybe speaking to Biden, he was still president at the time. Or maybe you don't speak to Biden. Maybe you go talk to Jake Sullivan
Lincoln
or something.
or whatever.
Yeah, Lincoln. You say, look, if we, we actually cannot beat them at this war, or if we, it will be extremely costly. There's going to be a huge cost in terms of, American military equipment. We could lose some ships. The Gulf of Hormuz will probably be closed. There's going to be huge economic consequences if we go down this path. And maybe our civilian leadership will say, okay, we just can't do it. It's going to, the pro-Israel crowd is going to come at us, tooth and nail. They're going to cut off my funding, but we just can't do it. We just hope that there's some sort of realism, hope against hope. It's not impossible. Even, the most ideologically crazed people generally have some kind of grasp on reality, and it just may be at some point they pull back. I mean, it happened like with Mao at various times during the Cultural Revolution. He took things really far, but then there are certain points when you realize, oh, okay, I actually can't do that. That could bring down the whole government, or this could cause nuclear war and whatever, and he would pull back. So that's what we hope for. It's just that maybe this really is the wake up call, that finally woke up the U.S. government to the reality, and just they finally said no. Finally, they will say no to Israel. That's
right.
That's what we can hope. That's one possibility. But the other, is that Netanyahu gets up there and makes his impassioned speech to save Israel, and those pro-Israel forces are. We know how powerful they are in the U.S., and they just overwhelm the realists. And we just go in, and we have a huge, the U.S. becomes involved in a real war with Iran. And it's terrible for Iran. Don't pretend that Iran won't suffer. They'll suffer the most. But it won't be. They won't be able to really defeat them. And I think it's highly unlikely that they'll overthrow the government. The Iranian people, I think by and large, are going to rally around the flag, and they've shown that they fought a horrible war with Iraq, years ago, and suffered greatly, and I think they know that they're being attacked. I think everybody understands in Iran. It's like the pro-Western factions. They exist there, but they become weaker, especially as a result of Israeli and U.S. behavior since after October 7th. And they will understand who the aggressors are, and they'll fight back, and they won't give up. And they've been preparing for this kind of war for many years, because, the U.S. and Israel have been threatening Iran for, roughly, 20 years. Ever
As long as I
since
can remember.
Yeah, right. I think
Right.
it probably, I know it goes back even further, but, especially since the 9/11. Of course, Iran had nothing to do with that, but at that time, they were put on the target list. Iraq was at the top. We went after them, and then the same people, the neocons, wanted to go after Iran, and they've been pushing for it ever since. And Netanyahu has been demanding it for a long time.
Okay, well, let's just dive a little deeper. So now, Israel Iran retaliates against Israel again if they pull off a successful attack in Iran. Now we have two options, right? that maybe the United States has a sense of realism and pulls back. But if they don't, and Netanyahu gets his way and the U.S. commits, then we have all of our military bases that are in the Middle East will get wiped out, right? They're sitting ducks. They're
Right.
just, they the Iraqi militias could probably take care of themselves. And if not, the Iranians can just shoot ballistic missiles, and we know that they can't defend themselves. Some of them don't even have air defense. So airfields, all that stuff, your launch pads in the Middle East are gone, right? Like where would you even lead an attack from if the U.S. wants to? Because it's not like in Europe where you can just kind of pile things up on the border of Russia. Here, around Iran, there's nothing. Nobody's going to let you establish any type of logistics base, any airfields around there. The Saudis aren't going to allow that. The Qataris are. The Jordanians won't. They know that this is, they don't want, they've already said publicly that we're not letting, you
Right.
use our airspace to carry these attacks.
Right. We'll
Then
see if
what
they
you
hold
have
on
the
that.
option.
Okay, right. I mean, it's possible that some of these, are, in the end, will succumb to U.S. pressure. Some of these Gulf states, like I guess, Qatar has very, very close relations with the U.S.
Right. But as
it's
time goes on,
it's doubtful, though. They've already, it used to be that they were solidly in the U.S. camp, and that's just no longer true. That's part of how this is the new Middle East. And
Right.
I'm sure the Israelis and the Americans are discovering it. They used to be able to count on these people, and they can't. Maybe they'll be able to pull some of them back to their side over the course of a war, but they can't count on it. Let's just put it that way.
I doubt it. It's just going to be so unpopular. I feel like that, and just the momentum is moving away from, against Israel and the United States. People are wanting to distance themselves, and they realize that they have the ability to say no and to stand up to the U.S., largely because of what's happening in Ukraine and Russia and in Iran itself. People are moving towards this new central axis of resistance and this new power center that's originating over there in the region, especially in Russia. So I think that the U.S., even if it wanted to, it would have a very tough time, launching an attack against Iran. I mean, if you want to use your aircraft carriers or whatever, those are going to get shot out. We're talking about naval vessels are really just big sitting, floating ducks on the ocean, and that can be targeted with these ballistic missiles or cruise missiles, hypersonic missiles, drones,
Right.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen the Houthis cause problems just with their, ragtag bunch of GDP per capita of like $200. They're able to do damage.
Right.
So I just, if we do go down that route, I think it's just not going to play out the way people think it's going to play out.
Right.
We may find that we're not even able to do it. Those bases are gone. Our ships can't get close enough. Nobody in the region is allied with us now and will allow us to use their airspace or facilities or whatever as a launching pad for any type of attack against Iran. Israel will just get pummeled, right? And the United States will pull out. I just don't see how we could even wage a war against Iran. Is there something I'm missing? Is there some capabilities that
I think you're probably right. Again, you never know what's going to happen until the war begins. We've had surprises in the Lebanon war. I think everybody was surprised by the vulnerability of the Hezbollah leadership and the ability of Israel to take them out. There was some talk about, air defense within Lebanon. We haven't seen it. It's kind of a mixed bag when it comes to, I think, the rocket and missile attacks. They have done some damage. They haven't done very serious damage, but they've shown that they have a lot of them. We don't know, how much more they have and what if they have some more advanced models that they're holding in reserve. They probably are. And then let's say on the land battle, though, seems to be going, as far as I can tell, very well for Hezbollah and very poorly for the IDF, which is what we predicted. But anyway, there are always surprises in war, and there could be, again, the Americans and the Israelis might have some trick up their sleeves that we just can't foresee. So I don't think you ever want to be just real confident about how things are going to turn out. Iran is a big country. It's prepared for this war. It has, some impressive technology. But the U.S., even though it has been weakened by the Ukraine war, is a major power with a very, with the world's most powerful air force. I think, that's what everybody claims, and it seems like even the pro-Russian people admit this. They can do a lot of damage, but as you point out, it's clear that the U.S. can suffer a lot of damage too. I mean, they could end up just devastating. I mean, the U.S. could end up devastating Iran. Could do a lot of damage to its civilian and military infrastructure, I'm sure. But they wouldn't be able to wipe it out. Iran, again, is a very big country that's prepared for this. They have a lot of facilities underground. And in the course of doing this, I think there's no question that the U.S. is going to suffer a lot of damage. Like you say, their various military bases in Syria and in Iraq are sitting ducks, and Iran already demonstrated that after the assassination of Soleimani. They hit him with tremendous precision. I think everybody admits that. So they can just, and they were careful not to kill anybody, but they demonstrated that they can hit where they want on those bases. So they could really take those out, do a lot of damage, and then the ships. Right, their ships in modern warfare are just very vulnerable, and I think there's no question that they could sink some of our ships, and that would be a huge blow to U.S. prestige. I mean, so I think that's one reason right there the Pentagon does not want to get involved in this in any significant extent, and they just may start screaming. If the civilian leadership, the Biden administration, tries to push them, into war, I think they, at the behest of Netanyahu, they might at the same. We just can't do this. This is going to be the end of, American military hegemony. We can't do it. Sorry, guys. And that's what I'm hoping. That's just what I'm hoping because, again, they are vulnerable there, and I think they understand that. This is not like attacking Iraq, or. You've seen the problems they've had with Yemen. You brought that up. And I mean, Yemen is just like 1/10 of 1% of Iran. I mean, they've done a lot of, they've actually made the U.S. Navy appear completely impotent. They just haven't been able to achieve anything there against Yemen. And, and then there's always the kind of the nuclear, figuratively speaking, in quotes, the nuclear option that, not Israel, but Iran can always exercise, and that is to cut off the Gulf of Hormuz and go after other oil facilities in the region and just cause, economic mayhem. I think they would be very reluctant to do that because it hurts them too. But if it becomes existential, they always can do that.
Right. I mean, gas will go up to $10-20 a gallon here in the U.S. You're going to have...
Yeah, it's going to be very unpopular
we'll have
at that point.
throughout the West.
Right.
Yeah, and you said, the U.S. military might really relies on their Air Force. That's kind of what projected our dominance, that we were able to have complete air superiority whenever we go into any of these, previous Middle East wars, going to Iraq or Afghanistan, the first Persian Gulf War, all this. We just fly our fighter jets over and, everyone's like, yeah, America, and we drop bombs and do things and come out unscathed. But we can't do that here. And we're saying, what if they, if we do, then our airfields get hit. So if we don't have that air dominance anymore, and the fact that Iran has S-400s, it's just a completely different game. We haven't been in this before, and from what I gather, it just doesn't seem like we can do it. We would lose. I know that sounds crazy to say that, the idea that the U.S. will lose to Iran, but there's just been so much hype about the U.S. for so long about how great we are, and there's just this tendency to kind of view everybody that is not part of the collective West, as third world, and they're just, they're just barbarians or whatever, to dehumanize them, and they have that impression of Iran without realizing that how well Iran's developed and its relationship with China and Russia and their technologies. It's a very advanced place. You see pictures of their metro system. I'm like, man, New York could never get a metro like Tehran has, because it was built by the Chinese, and it's I just think people don't realize that, and it's just this hubris. I think a lot of it is just kind of just built-in racism in a way that just assume that all these people that are not white or Caucasian.
I often hear it. Well, you could say it's a kind of racism, and people say, well, it's directed against brown people. Well, first of all, Iranians aren't particularly brown, but they're brownish, you know. But anyway,
It doesn't matter.
yeah, it doesn't matter. But it's the same when it comes to Russia. The thing is, like, people will say that to explain U.S. behavior, Western behavior vis-a-vis these other countries, it's racism, you know, against the black and brown people of the earth. And maybe to some extent it is, but I don't see, if anything, like the levels of vitriol and denigration, you know, against Russia and Serbia were higher and are higher. I mean, it's just like, it's the same thing when they talk about Russia. They're just a bunch of savages, you know, they're dependent on, well, you know, it gets really crazy. Like they're dependent on missiles from North Korea and from Iran, you know, it's just like, and they fight with shovels and whatever, and they just use human wave taxes. It's all utter nonsense, but it's never ending. I mean, there's just, there's, even now after, you know, the failure of course, you know, the summer offensive of last year, and just the Russian advances, and also the failure of the Kursk offensive, it's becoming clear to everybody that was a total bust, and that the Russians have the upper hand. They still denigrate the Russians. They still, you know, try to just put it down to, well, they're just barbarians and they don't care about human life, and they just throw, you know, it's so I wouldn't say that it's racism. I know I hear people say that, and maybe there's an element of that sometimes, but I think it's just, it's just this supremacist, it's a Western supremacist way of thinking, you know, it's regardless of race, that it just, you know, especially American, it's just like, you know, it's just like, and it takes on a really ugly form in Israel, but that's something else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it almost seems to me like the progressives, you know, more left-leaning people will be quicker to demonize the Russians and be like, oh, you know, these evil Russians, and have a bit more sympathy for the Palestinians and the people in the Middle East. Right. And then people on the right, though, are the other way around. They have more sympathy and understanding for the Russian side, but they want to denigrate and demonize the Middle Eastern community. You know, so it's
right. That's true.
There is a bit, you know.
There's a little bit. Yeah, I think that's true. But it is a minority on both sides. You know, it's a minority that are truly generally on the left, not entirely. You know. That is sympathetic to the Palestinians to some significant degree. And then it's a minority on the right that's sympathetic to the Russians to some degree. But it's a minority in both cases. You have a majority, I think, of both left and right, and certainly of the whole spectrum that's just prejudice against them both.
Right. Well, let's hope we can create this majority of not looking at it in that way at all, instead of just trying to achieve peace and end these conflicts and learn how to live together in a multipolar world. Like, that's what we really need to push forward. So I think that is gaining a bit of traction, you know, the people seeing it through, you know, that lens, and not of this any kind of racial lens, political lens, left, right, instead of just like, let's just stop killing each other and get along, engage in trade. You know, let's let go of the hegemonic dream. You know, that's what I say, the supremacist dream. Okay, hey, we're a great country. Yeah, but there are other great countries out there. Let's just get along with them.